So tonight it's Monday night once again, and we have the incredible honor and privilege of hearing from Rabbi Josh Broide. Rabbi Broide is the director of the Deborah and Larry the Silver Center for Jewish Engagement and division of the Jewish Federation of South Palm Beach County, and he's also the founder and director of the Boca Raton Jewish Experience, a rapidly growing outreach and engagement program in Boca Raton, Florida. In addition, he also works as the outreach rabbi at the Boca Raton Synagogue. I mean, again, it's really an honor and privilege to have Rabbi Broide here with us tonight. Now, so we got we got the bio out of the way. I just wanted to give two personal stories of just how incredible Rabbi Broide's reach truly is and why I asked him to speak about sort of this topic tonight. The first happened, I guess, maybe now 2 or 3 months ago, I don't remember. Momentum, formerly JWP, was doing part of some like Jewish geography Facebook event or something called Who Knows One. And there was this game where people tried to connect to people on Zoom or whatever. And I'm listening to this. Actually, I wasn't listening. My mother was downstairs, and I heard Rabbi Broide's voice. I'm like, at first I thought she was listening to Behind the Viva, but then I laughed and I'm like, no, but Rabbi Broide doesn't get enough airtime on that. So then I figured out that he was on this thing, and it's really a testament that with 1 or 2 clicks, Rabbi Josh Broide's name is definitely in your face. He's just really everywhere doing everything. The other story, which really touched me, and I really never told anyone, but this, I don't know, it profoundly changed the way I view sort of the Jewish people and Jewish unity. And that is the fact that I guess sometime over the summer I was on a shir with Rav Yair. Some of you may have known he was a shaliach here for B'nai Akiva in Toronto. And I was on a shir with him, and a girl popped on, looked like she was in the army or something, and she unmuted herself to tell us that, yes, she's in the army, and she was doing a lot of things because they had like a 10-minute break, but she heard that this year was happening and she wanted to join. And her name was Abigail Broide. And I was just blown away by, here's a fact that there's this girl from Florida that's serving as a lone soldier defending Israel and the Jewish people. And here she is in the 10-minute break that she has, that she could be doing anything. Her first instinct was to learn Torah from one of her teachers. And that was, honestly, like, that was mind-blowing. And really, it just shows not only that Rabbi Broide is doing a great job in the Boca Raton community, but it really starts in his home as well. So, Rabbi Broide, the floor is all yours.
First of all, thank you. That was very, very nice. I appreciate that introduction. I knew you were going to say that. I would have told my mom to join because she would have been very excited to hear all of that. And I did not know that story about Abigail, so that's very special. My daughter she actually just texted us. I guess she has some sort of an app on the phone where it says how many days she's served and how many days are left. So if you know my daughter, if you don't, I mean, there's no reason you would know her, but if she's no different than any one of you. She's a Jewish North American, right? Canadian, United States, it's all the same thing. And after high school, she decided to go to the Israeli army. Turns out she didn't go to the Israeli army. She actually went to the Israeli Air Force. Why did she decide on the Air Force? Why not the IDF? Well, she's a Boca girl. She liked the uniform better. So I'm not sure that's entirely the right story, but that's one of the stories I heard. But the bottom line is she served already 800 days, and she's got, I think the magic number is about 960. So she's about 82%, 83% of the way there. She's almost there. It's a long time. It's a really, really a long time. But I guess just on what you said, Kyle, it's really something which anyone can do. It's one of those things where I wish that when I was in high school that someone would have presented that as an option for me. But back, in the early 90s, it really wasn't an option. They weren't, what we call today lone soldiers going to Israel and then having opportunities to go for, any amount of time. My son-in-law also, he just made Aliyah. He was in the army for about a year, a shorter period of time, but there's options, and It's definitely a noble act. So first of all, I want to thank you. You know, it's a hard time for all of us. There's no question that we're all dealing with challenges right now. Um, I think the, the examples of something which, if there is something that's good that came out of this whole experience, which obviously is not a good thing. No one would ever say, let's give us something called COVID so that we could get something good out of it. But definitely one of the results is these forms that have been put on online. Zoom was not invented the day after COVID. It's been around for years, but for some reason, most people didn't take advantage of this type of technology. And now you've got a group of teenagers, incredible teenagers, getting together, learning Torah, learning from each other, being inspired by different things, because we can. And there's no reason that these types of connections can't outlast this epidemic. Hopefully, everyone will be safe and vaccinated at some point. But to be able to connect communities across the globe so easily like this, so it's fascinating. So I want to share with you something that I'm involved in, and the only reason I want to share with you is because I hope that you can do something about it, and I hope that you can be involved. Guys, look like you're all motivated. The fact that you tuned in on this, I mean, I don't think you're getting paid to do this, right? I mean, and Kyle doesn't look like the kind of guy that would threaten anyone to join a Zoom on a Tuesday night. Monday. What's today? Monday? Tuesday? I don't even know what day it is today. Monday?
Tonight
Tuesday?
is Monday, and yes, I'm not
Monday
paying
already?
people, because if I was, I would be paying a lot more people to
Right,
come listen to
exactly.
you.
So you all look like fantastic people. And I'll tell you one thing that I've really tried to dedicate a lot of time to in the last couple of years, and that's just Jews getting along with each other. We live in a crazy world right now. The whole world is in shambles. The whole world, no one knows what's going to be. And sometimes when you get down to basics, there's a very basic question that you could ask yourself, and you can ask any one of your Jewish friends. And most people are going to kind of struggle to come up with an answer. People figure out a lot of excuses. It's very easy to come up with excuses if they feel uncomfortable giving an answer. But it's the simplest question in the book. You know what it is? Why can't the Jews just get along with each other? So, to me, this is like the most basic question. It seems to be a question that I think if people really thought about it, I think if people really wanted to do something about it, they could probably come up with a lot of great solutions to this problem. You're just listening today. I think Rabbi Goldberg, is it Rabbi Goldberg? I think it was Rabbi Goldberg. Maybe on Shabbat he was giving his drasha. He referenced this. It's a famous statistic. Let's just say there are 14 million Jews in the world today, give or take. A little bit here or there. Um, there's no question the Jews have made an impact in the world, which doesn't really match the insignificant numbers. He said that the Jewish population is a if you took you compare that to the population, let's say, of a country like China, it's the number that we are would be a statistical, what do you call it, like a statistical when a number can go this way or that way, when we talk about statistics and numbers of populations. um Come on, guys, help me out there. I see it.
Anomaly?
What? Inaccuracy, like a
Anomaly.
statistical, like mistake, so to speak. In China is the number of the entire Jewish people, a real number. And yet, we can talk about all the great accomplishments of the Jewish people. We've done so much, accomplished so many great things in the world of healthcare and technology, and there's no one that's really doing as much. And yet, when it comes to the most basic things, like just getting along with each other, we'll say, "Oh, you know what? Leave that for the other person." I say, "You're so smart. You can't figure out the most basic things." Like just being a nice example of what it means to have a good friend and a relationship and respect one another. It's strange to me, and I've never understood it. We know that at the core of our Jewish belief is there's a fundamental belief which says, love your neighbor, love your neighbor. So the problem is, I think sometimes Jews take that a little bit too literally. And they say, who I have to love is literally my neighbor, is the people that I associate with. people that I surround myself with. If I live in a particular community, it's probably because there's many Jews that are similar to me, but Jews that are in any way different than me, well, you know what? Probably not going to show a lot of love. There's probably not going to be a lot of call it a demonstration of uh, of of love or that type of relationship. The question is why? Why is that something which seems to elude us? Why is it something which we seem not to be able to get right? And is it something which is achievable? So the answer is the short answer is of course it's achievable because God wouldn't instruct us to do something if it wasn't achievable. You know, if he expects the entire Jewish world, which is a very small family, to get along with each other, it's got to be achievable. And then the question becomes, well, why are we not doing it? If it is achievable, so why are people not doing it? I just think that there are two reasons. Reason number one is that for the most part, I think when it comes to this, Jews are just lazy. You know, it just doesn't, you know, it's either not on the top 10 list and for some reason it just doesn't, it's not on, you know, the minds of most Jews. And unfortunately, I'd say there's probably another reason, besides just being lazy, is that some people just don't think it's possible. You know, they've seen too many examples of where Jews fight with one another. And you can take examples, you know, well, let's look at the extreme examples, okay? And in the United States, you don't even really see the confrontation. There's just no interaction, and I think that's even worse. You know, you could say, well, Jews are very different. You know, we have streams of Judaism. What do we have? We have Reform Jews, we have conservative Jews, we have Orthodox Jews. But I feel like even before we get to the different streams and how they might be so different, and don't forget what's so strange about all this is that every one of us has different types of Jews, even in our own families. So so it's not like, you know, this is who I am. Okay, this is who you are, but you know, take a look into your family. I started doing a little project when COVID began, and I kind of closed the book because it gets too intense, and then I open it again. I close it again. It's you know, ancestry, just trying to figure out who my family is, and it's really fascinating to see because you see the diversity of the Jewish world in your own family, and yet when it comes to trying to make amends and trying to figure out how we can build relationships in our own families in the Jewish world, you know, we think that's not for us, but it's in our own backyard, it's in our own family. So let's just break it down for a second because I want to show you how we've really made such a mess of this, and there's no reason we can't kind of, you know, really do our part to fix it. So let's just assume that in I don't know what the statistics are in Canada, but let's just take a look at North American Jews in the United States. And how many Jews live in Canada? Anyone know? America, United States, about 5 million. I don't know what is it, another half a million. Anyone know?
Maybe a million.
Maybe
No,
a million. I don't think
couple
it's even
hundred
that many.
thousand.
Okay, whatever the number might be. Let's just assume then, for argument's sake, there's 6 million Jews in North America. The average is that, you know, based on most statistical studies, is that about half of that number don't identify with a major movement in the United States. Okay, so what does that mean? It doesn't mean they might not observe or connect to Judaism. Just for whatever reason, they're not officially connecting. Okay, so for the most part, those Jews aren't part of formal Jewish communities, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, or whatever other groups you want to consider. So automatically off the top, we sliced it in half. Okay, so now we're left with in North America, which used to be the largest Jewish community in the world. Now it's in Israel. But now you have, let's say, 3 million left. Of the 3 million that remain, and again, I'm going to tell you numbers, let's just say from more of the United States than Canada. I just don't know the Canadian numbers that well, but it probably wouldn't be that different. Of the 3 million that remain, the largest denomination in the United States is the Reform movement, followed by the Conservative movement, followed by the Orthodox movement. Reform in America is about 1.2 million. Okay, conservatives about a million, and these numbers are fluctuating. They're going down. They're not going up in the movements. And they say that in the United States, the Orthodox community is about 600,000 or 700,000. 600,000 or 700,000. You know how many people that is? That's nothing. So you say, well, at least then just take the Orthodox community as an example. Say, well, at least that's a group, okay, that they probably all get along with each other. Or within the Reform movement, that's a group that all gets along with each other. I don't know about the Reform and the conservative movements, but I can tell you within the Orthodox movement, that's going to be far from true, because what do you have within that small family of Jews called the Orthodox movement? You have the modern Jews, you have the Hasidic Jews, you got the Yeshivish Jews, you got the ultra Orthodox Jews, you got the centrist Jews. And then you say, well, okay, well, at least all the Hasidim get along. Well, I don't know. You got this group of Hasidim, you got that group of Hasidim, you got that group of, they all practice almost the same, but there are certain things about the way each one of these groups practice that's a little bit different. So instead of everyone saying, you know what, we're all different, we have different experiences, this is what I do, this is what you do, you'll find that there's a lot of people within the Jewish world that, within the Orthodox world, just as a small example, can't get along with one another. So what is going on here? The whole world is in shambles. Things are not doing so great. A year ago today, right? We were just entering what we call COVID. It was just beginning. Since then, things haven't been so great for the world. Why can't we just figure out how to get along? Why can't we do it? So I'll tell you something special that actually happened in our community, just to show you again that when we talk about, it's not millions and millions and millions of hundreds of millions of people. Talk about the Christian Catholic community, billion, 2 billion, right? Muslims, a billion, Hindu, Buddhists, 800 million Jews. It's the smallest little community. It's a fraction of a people. So I'll tell you something special that happened here. I moved to Boca Raton. I don't know if you guys ever been to Boca? Anyone been to Boca? Yeah. Okay. So you go to Boca, and you'll notice that on the one hand, it's a very old community in the sense that there are a lot of older folks that live here. On the other hand, it's a very young community. I'm just talking about in terms of age. It's a new community, right? 45 years ago, Jews couldn't live in Boca. 50 years ago, right? Slowly we started coming in, started populating the community and becoming a bigger force in the community. But there was a time, just like you had in many communities across the United States, Jews weren't allowed in. Boca was one of them. Kind of showed them, and we kind of, the mayor of Boca is a Jew now. City councilmen are Jews now in Boca. But one of the things that we started noticing is that when we all came here as young rabbis, whether it was an Orthodox rabbi, Reform rabbis, is that because we were young when we came, and there was no reason to leave because it's such a nice community, kind of all grew up together, from our mid-20s, and now 20 years later, we're all kind of in our mid-40s or early 50s. And what we kind of noticed is that whether we took trips together on programs like March of the Living, we took trips together, Federation programs to Israel, all of a sudden over the years, and it's been a lot of years, we all became friends with one another. And all of a sudden, after already having these relationships that were built, in spite of the fact that we were all so different, talking about leaders that grew up in a very narrow world, right? Didn't make a difference which one of the streams you grew up in, or didn't make a difference how you grew up, what your family background was. You grew up in a certain way. This was the way I understood. Rabbi Goldberg always gives the example of how, it wasn't just as an Orthodox rabbi, he never had a chance to meet a conservative rabbi or Reform rabbi growing up in Teaneck in New Jersey. Said he never met a Chabad rabbi. Because why would you? Every community is so insular. Why would you meet someone that's even a little bit different than you? So slowly, all the rabbis in our community started getting together. And we started saying, we don't have to be an official board or an official committee, but we can be friends. And why can't we just get together when we need to solve problems? Why can't we get together when it comes to creating an atmosphere of peace and harmony and working together, collaboration? So all of a sudden, we started working on so many different types of projects, which had we not had these relationships, they never would have worked. I'll give you an example, something that happened just a few years ago. It's not a earth-shattering idea, but the whole point here is that nothing needs to be earth-shattering. It just needs to be people working together instead of people saying, no, I can't work with you because you're different than me. So every synagogue, you can imagine Purim time. We just celebrated Purim last week. So pre-COVID, there was something called a Purim Carnival. Right? What's a Purim carnival? Remember, when you were a kid, you'd go to the synagogue, go to the shul, you go into the bounce house, and believe it or not, these bounce houses and these little amusement rides, they cost lots of money. So every shul, right, synagogue sets it up. You pay your $10, you go in. No one's making money on these things. But we said, why is everyone spending a few $1,000s on these Purim carnivals? Why don't we all share the expense? We'll all pay, but we'll end up paying a lot less. Instead of 15 different carnivals in the community, why don't we just do one big one? We all pay less. We do it bigger. So now it's better for every single kid that the entire community wants to come in. And you can actually push it out there to a wider audience because we're doing it together. It seems like a no-brainer. And of course, it was a no-brainer. That's the beauty of it. And it was like the most successful event. Of course, we did it a second year. And it's become one of those things which it's just, what else can we do to collaborate for the benefit of the entire community? One of the results of this idea, and we ran Jewish unity events throughout the years. We were actually awarded, I don't know if you remember, a couple years ago, I think it was 2014, there were three boys, Ayal, Gilad, and it was Ayal, Gilad, and
Naftali Franco.
Naftali, right? Naftali. So there were three boys that were kidnapped. Three boys of your age. They were kidnapped in Israel. And for an entire month, the entire Jewish world didn't make a difference where you were, what country you lived in, or what you were doing that summer. The entire Jewish world came together to pray and hope that these boys would be returned safely. Unfortunately, we found out 30 day after the 30-day mark that they didn't make it. They didn't even make it to the 30-day mark. And the parents, instead of showing anger, instead of demonstrating, and of course there was this feeling of what do you do in retribution, and what do you do? How do you react? But the parents came together and said, we saw something so magical during that time. They used the example and they said, you ever walk outside during a thunderstorm? It's dark outside. And you go to a place where there's no light, there's no natural light. And all of a sudden you see some lightning. And what happens with that first burst of lightning? The entire sky lights up and you can see for miles for a second. And then as soon as the lightning goes away, it's black again. So Racheli Frankel, one of the boy's mothers, said, that's in fact what happened during that 30-day period. We saw an entire world, Jewish world, coalesce and come together to pray on behalf of our boys. And it really didn't make a difference if you were religious or not religious, if you were this type of Jew or that type of Jew. Instead, what happened? Everyone came together because there was a crisis. And so what we said and what they said is, why should you have to wait for a crisis for the Jews to come together? All that proves is that you can, but you have to wait for another crisis. Why can't we get together when times are great? So we started putting on these unity events and we challenged people in the community. What can you do to get together? What can you do to demonstrate that in spite of the differences, not saying you have to agree with each other, but that you can do something together. So whether it was the schools that started doing programming together, after hurricanes, we have so many of these hurricanes here. What can you do? Okay, let's get the two schools which never did a program together. Two very different schools in the community went down to the Keys to help out after one of the hurricanes. How different divisions of different synagogues got together socially. Certain things you can't do from a religious standpoint because they're going to be too different. But what can you do? Together, we brought a group of Israeli soldiers that had been injured in one of the Israeli wars. The Reform Synagogue and an Orthodox synagogue together hosted a program for an entire week. Why not? And that should be really the question. Well, why shouldn't you be able to? The problem is, I'll give you an example of programs we've done, but no one else is doing programs like this. More are now because they see it's possible. And then the best part was after we found out from those three families, they had been working with the president of the state of Israel, the mayor of Jerusalem, some other members of the Israeli Knesset, and over the years, some very prominent programs like Birthright. You've all heard of Birthright. You're going to get your free trip to Israel one day, right? Birthright was awarded this Unity Prize, right? Because of all that they do to bring different types of Jews on a program together. Even though those programs are actually not bringing different types of Jews together, they bring a bus of this type of Jew and a bus of that type of Jew. That's for another time. But they got this award one year. But our community was the first and only community to ever receive this award. it's called the Jerusalem Unity Prize. And it's something we're very proud of because there's not a day that goes by where we say, what else can we do to demonstrate that it is easy for anyone to go beyond their whatever their perceived differences are with another type of Jew and do nothing more than just try to be a friend. We're brothers. We're all brothers, you and I, right? We don't know each other yet, but we're all part of the same family. And are there going to be things about, your actual brother, if you have a brother or a sister you don't like? Of course there are. Are you the same person as any other member of your family? Probably not. There's no chance. We're just individuals. But you don't hate your brother because he's different than you, right? You don't say I can't get along with that person because he's different than me. In spite of all the differences, you feel a connection. The Jewish world is tiny, 14 million people. You look at the Jew that might be very different than you, right? We know what that Jew might look like in your own head. It's your brother, it's your sister. And when they say that we're coming up on the summer again, we're going to spend another day of mourning called Tisha B'av, mourning for the destruction of the temple, first temple, second temple. And they say, the reason the second temple was destroyed because Jews couldn't get along with each other. I hate to say this, but it's been 2,000 years. 2,000 years is a long time not to fix that problem. I'd say that's all it takes, right? For everything to kind of come back. And you say, well, I don't understand. We fixed it. We're working on it. We don't spend a minute working on it. Who's working on it? So I'll tell you one thing, don't wait for the leaders to start because unfortunately, sometimes the leaders are the worst, perpetrators of this problem. I wish they were doing a better job. Maybe for whatever reason, it's not a priority. I don't know why in their world it's not a priority. But sometimes, you lead by example. Sometimes you see people making a difference, but don't wait for them. Don't wait for them. It's not an excuse. So I'm gonna stop here. Okay, you guys are all awesome. I want to just see if there's any questions on this, questions on anything. We are opening the mics. Go for it. What we got there, Mordechai?
Rabbi, thank you so much. This is amazing. I'm just wondering, like, someone that's so different than you, how do you like find things to relate to and build that like Ahavas Yisrael with people that are like on the opposite ends of spectrums?
I'm telling you, I will show you that. Now, again, let's just be clear here. When we talk about people that are different than us, this happens a lot, where someone will come over to me and say, "I can't believe you spoke to that person. I can't believe you, whatever you said that." I said, we're not talking about sitting down with the Nazis, these the white supremacists. Like there are people who I would not, even I would say, like they're not in the parsha, they're not part of what we're trying to experience here. We're talking about just normal people, the average people that are just different than you. Look, I'll give you an example. My own family. I mean, I got every type of Jew in my family. I'll give you a few different types of examples. And these are not distant relatives. These are uncles, first cousins. I've got one set of first cousins that live in Israel. They were all American. They all made Aliyah, almost 3 out of 4. One cousin is call her the moderate, or the one that's kind of like mainstream. So she lives in Beit Shemesh in Israel, right? So Israel, it's the middle of the middle of the country. The other one lives in Maladimim, which politically speaking is in what you can call, I don't know what you want to call it. Call it the West Bank. Some people will call it Israel. Some people call it Yehuda v'Shamron. Some people call it Palestine. I mean, there's different depending on who you are and what your politics are. But you can just see that there's a dispute over that piece of property right outside Jerusalem. And then you have my other cousin lives in Tel Aviv. The two won't talk to each other. When one had a bar mitzvah, she's like, "I'll come, but I'm not coming if it's in that community because that's politically challenging for me." Let's just say. what do you do when you have family? Right now the intermarriage rate in America is, hovering around 80% outside the Orthodox community. It's challenging. I'm looking at a screen here of almost 10 people. Good chance you have it in your own families. It's just called a reality, right? Both of my uncles married women that were not Jewish, and they only had boys. So most of the Broide family right now, doesn't identify as Jewish. So it's very complicated. Are they still family? Of course, they're still family. My point is that you don't have to look too far to see diversity in a family. Everyone's going to find it. And I have 6 children. There's no question that each one of them are so different from each other. So how do you do it? So how do you find it? You asked a question. I hope I magnified the question a little bit, because it's real. It's real. So where do you find? So of course we do kids. None of my kids are like me. You still find a way. You find virtues in everything that they do. You still find things that you're impressed with. I like to put myself, and I don't know if I would recommend this to anyone without knowing who I'm talking to, but I like to put myself in a place which let's just say it's a place which it's very out of my comfort zone. Okay. I went on these different tours in Israel where you got to see a side of Israel. Let's just say that the average mainstream Orthodox rabbi would never go, whatever that might mean. Different types of programs, simply to listen. I think that's the key. I think that, and I told this to rabbis, to colleagues across the country. They said, well, what do you want me to do? I'm not ready to start doing this with someone or run that program. I don't. So, you do? You ready for this? You find a Jew. You could do this with one person. Do one person a year. Maybe over the course of your life, you do it with 30, 40, 50 people. You've changed the world already. You meet someone that's got a different value system than you. Someone that you say, I'm just not. I don't understand this person. The Jew just doesn't. I don't get it. You do. You just say, hey, let's go out for coffee. Let's go out for pizza. Let's go out. I want to get to know you. Tell me about yourself. And I think the problem is that the biggest problem we have is that we're not really listening to people. Last week's parsha. What happens when Moshe comes down? Moses is walking down the mountain. It's right after the Chet HaEgel, right after the sin of the golden calf. Right? What happens? He hears a lot of noise. So Yoshua is standing right next to him. Joshua is standing right next to him. He starts saying, I'm hearing all this shouting and yelling. He starts to explain what he thinks he's hearing. And Moses looks at Joshua and says, no, that's not what you're missing the ball. You know what I hear? He says, I hear sound of distress. Sound of distress. So the obvious question is, how did Moshe know what they were screaming about? Maybe there was a party going on. Maybe they saw a snake and they got scared and started screaming. Who knows what they saw? But Moshe pinpointed it. So they tell a story of, we're getting ready. I won't scare you, but Pesach's like 3.5 weeks away. A big rabbi, the Vilna Gaon, right? You heard of the Vilna Gaon? Raise your hand. You heard of the Vilna Gaon, right? So you can imagine the Vilna Gaon got knocks on his door every day. He didn't have, instant messengers and Twitter, and you had a question. You went over. You knocked on his door. People came for charity, right? He had a lot of tzedakah. People gave him money to give it out to distribute. So the story that they tell of a guy that comes, knocks on the Vilna Gaon's door, and he says, am I allowed to use milk for the 4 cups of wine? Can I use milk? Today we use milk, wine, we use grape juice. They didn't have grape juice back then. A little harder to come by. So the Vilna Gaon then says to his assistant, says, do me a favor, go get an envelope, some money, and put double the money in. Whatever the regular envelope is, give him 2 envelopes. The assistant looks back at the Vilna Gaon and he says, you're a big rabbi. He says, I didn't hear him even ask for money. When did he ask for money? He had a question. You're a rabbi. He asked you a question. Can you use milk instead of the wine? He says, no, you don't understand. If he's asking if you can use milk instead of wine, the guy obviously doesn't have any money for wine. That's what you and I might have picked up on. But if Vilna Gaon then says, you know what, by extension, if he has the money for wine and he's going to use milk, there's probably a good chance he doesn't have money for food. So you and I could talk to someone. We could think we're listening. We're not really listening. I don't know if you ever heard of the famous rabbi, Lord Jonathan Sachs, right? Passed away this year. Tragedy. You should study his books. He's a fantastic rabbi, great mentor, and great teacher. You know, if you look in the Siddur and you say the Shema, every day you say the Shema, he would always say, everyone knows it in Hebrew, everyone can translate it in English, Shema Yisrael, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord of God, the Lord is one. He said, it's not, what are you talking about? Here. Shema doesn't mean hear. Shema means listen. Listen, O Israel. Very big difference. You say, what's the difference between listen and hear? It's the same difference. I'm listening, I'm hearing. No, it's exactly the same point. One's passive and one's active. How many times do you talk to someone? We're like, you know, okay, I'm listening. I'm not really listening. I'm not really focused. If I really heard, I would see what exactly who they were and what their pain is. You know, we need to do a better job of listening to the other side. Not because you can do anything about the challenges they're going through. You're going to get into a political discussion with someone. Everyone thinks the louder they yell, you're going to convince the other person of your side, the religious side. Oh, if I yell louder than the other guy, I'm going to convince you of my opinion. It doesn't work like that. You show me one Republican that's ever been convinced by a Democrat of anything or vice versa. Because I yell. I'm going to tell you. No, are you crazy? Who does it? Yet families get together. Everyone's yelling at each other. That's the way you can convince. It doesn't work like that. But do the exact opposite. Why don't you listen to just listen to what they're saying? You might actually appreciate where they're coming from. Doesn't mean you're going to change your opinion. No one here is trying to change the other opinion. That's what that thing is. Everyone's afraid. If I go and listen to them, then I might change my opinion. If I'm religious and I listen to someone's not religious, I'm gonna all of a sudden not become religious. That's not okay. If that happens, it's not, you weren't religious in the first place, or you didn't have a strong core of belief, whatever you're gonna say. That's not because of a conversation. Everyone's so afraid. But you know what can happen? You can listen, you can empathize with someone else, and you can feel someone's pain. I'm really convinced of this. This is an issue. This has to happen. This is okay, great. Tell me why. What's going on? Oh, you know what? I never thought about it like that. And now I understand where you're coming from. I see why this is such an important issue for you. Not because I have to agree with you, but at least I understand where you're coming from. Religiously, politically. It's so important. We don't listen anymore. We don't listen to anyone. You know what we listen to? We listen to the same people with the same opinions. And then we wonder why, when we see someone that's totally different, why there's such an anger, or there's such a, you know, or if you say at the very best, it's just, I don't care about them because they're not like me. So at what point does someone say that? Okay, Ahavas Yisrael, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor like yourself. I'm loving my neighbors that are like me. I'm not loving my neighbors that are not like me. It turns into a joke. And yet we all think we're doing something so great. We're not doing anything. We haven't done anything. So I think the key would be to, you know, try this exercise with anyone. Just listen. You know, it might feel uncomfortable. That's okay. Trust me, I've sat down with people the furthest from me that I could ever imagine. And it gets uncomfortable. But it's still my brother. Still trying to build a bridge, right? Okay, what else you got? Could be on this subject or on any subject. Anything at all.
And maybe that's a question that, like, I feel like this question might be a little bit uncomfortable, but like when it comes to, what about for those people who like many people who say like I believe that like every Jew really thinks that there's achdus, right, and it's necessary for achdus, right, whether you're Haredi or Reform, whatever. But the difference is that I feel like there's those Jews who, I guess, there are Jews though who would say to themselves, like, what do you say to those Jews who would say like, oh, I don't really consider this kind of group Jewish, or they don't want to make, like, for example, if someone has like, let's say somebody says I want to have achdus, right?
That's a good question. Okay, so that's a very, very good question. Okay, so I'm going to answer it in two ways, because I do get that pushback. I get that all the time from certain types of Jews. they're I don't know which one to start with first. They're both important. So on the one hand, let's look back, and I come back to the Holocaust sometimes just because I've taken the March of the Living. I've done that, I don't know, 15 times already. And one of the stories that just keeps coming out, glaring at me, everyone's going to have a different takeaway from walking through a concentration camp. For me, it was that, Hitler didn't ask you, were you Reform, were you conservative, were you Orthodox, which shul did you go to, which shul didn't you go to? Were you a Jew? Were you a Jew? Were you Jewish? And the answer is yeah. Okay, so now you're gonna die, right? And the question then we always have to ask ourselves as well. You see a train full of these Jews leaving the train station, headed to a concentration camp, and you're kind of, for whatever reason, stuck at the train station. What would you have done? Right? What would you ran up to the train? Would you try to save someone? Right? It was Reb Noach Weinberg that said the following story, which I'll never forget. The former head of the Esha Torah Yeshiva in Jerusalem, where he says, you see someone drowning, right? You see someone drowning. So what do? You have an obligation. Try to save that person, right? Jump in the water. You say, well, I can't swim. Okay, and the guy drowns. There's no obligation for you to, put yourself in a dangerous situation to save someone else. Okay, and you walk by the river the next day. The same thing happens. Well, I can't jump in. I can't swim. Okay, the third time, the fourth time. There's some point where you say, I got an obligation to learn how to swim, right? I got to do it. There's a Jewish world out there. I guess the second point is when it comes to different types of Jews, call it of questionable, authentic, whatever that might mean, because again, it's a very touchy subject. Obviously, there's certain things which are, but even within that world, if someone is like that, has a feeling where they can't interact with certain types for whatever reason, there are still Jews that are 100 in that world that are 100% Jewish. They might not be doing the things that you would like them to do, but there's no question. Is it 100% Jew? There's no 99% Jewish. It's either 100% or 0%. So if they're Jewish, they're Jewish. If they're not, they're not. Okay, so there are plenty of Jews. We still have 13,999,000 that are still out there that you can, if you want to dismiss the ones which are questionable, whatever that might be. Yeah, and I guess that's really it. I'm saying there's plenty of, I would say that it's more of an excuse. So don't deal with the most extreme situation. Deal with the ones which are probably your neighbors, which are right there. There's so many examples of people that are, you don't have to search. These are not people, we're not talking about people that, I'll give you an example. There are people in our own shuls, or even in our own families. Maybe there's someone you could think of right now in your own family that's just different. Avos Yisrael means work on that relationship. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? Or the person that's so different in your shul. I know in my shul, politically, we might be majority like this, but there are those that are like that. Those people don't get together socially, right? There are people that send their kids in our community to this school, and there's people that send their kids in that school. So you don't have to say, well, I don't do this because they're part of this movement and that's very different than me. They're in the same movement as you, right? But it's much easier just to gravitate to the people that are so similar to us. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha doesn't mean the people are similar. It means the people are different. There's got to be a little bit of a challenge here. You got to be working on. You got to be putting something together. So, yeah, I like to go for the challenges. everyone else is welcome to go for the easier, the basics. Those are still very, very, those are the most significant steps. You have to do
And
something.
that really is the message of BRS, the Boca Raton Synagogue, that unity is without uniformity, that people can be different and people should be different, but that shouldn't stop us or hinder us in any way from achieving that unity that we so desperately need in order to not only just create a healthy Jewish people, but also to ultimately rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, as Rabbi Broide was speaking about a little bit earlier.
If you take a look at our logo, it says, Boca Raton Synagogue, celebrating unity, valuing diversity, right? That's what it is. There's nothing greater when you walk into the shul and you see someone that's sitting down next, for the first time in a shul next to someone with a strimal. It's not happening in New York City, those types of things. And the best part is, I know Rabbi Goldberg, he, about 2 years ago, and this is where I'll recommend, I'll come back to this in a second. I have to wind down here, but, he took a group to Poland also. And it was a group from the shul, many different types of Jews, different backgrounds. And the funny thing is, they all became very good friends. I'm talking about Hasidic people along with modern people. You say, well, they're still Orthodox. Yeah, but let me say, in each of their worlds, they didn't associate with each other. And there's no reason they ever would have, in spite of the fact that davened in the same shul. So there's, so the one Hasidic guy, very Hasidic guy from New York, his daughter got married, and all the other people from the trip flew up to the wedding, and they're genuinely friends. But they never would have had a Shabbos meal together because their paths wouldn't have ordinarily crossed. And I will say that, there's a point where I'm not sure what the appropriate age is. I've seen it happen now in the March of Living many times. Seniors in high school, right before you go off to college. Unfortunately, the March of Living hasn't happened last year or this year. But it's a great example. It's one of the only examples of where you can have a trip of many different types of high school students together, at least in Boca, on the same bus. So you can have high school, public school students sitting next to private school students, sitting next to yeshiva students, all on the same bus. We have a few of those where sometimes for the first time they get to interact with each other. They've never done it before. Public school teenagers never met a boy or a girl from a local yeshiva high school. And the funny part is, they find out they're actually not that different. I'll give you one. I'm going to end with this. Okay, one more story because I love this story. There was a girl. Her name was Samantha Mead. This goes back probably about 5 years ago in the March. And there was another girl, Ayala. Ayala and Samantha were going to be going on the March of Living together. One went to the Yeshiva High School, Boca, and the other one went to a school called Pinecrest. Pinecrest is one of the elite preparatory high schools in South Florida. One went to Boca Raton Synagogue, one Orthodox, one went to the Reform Temple Bethel. And they decided to get together for a coffee, just to meet each other. They met at one of the classes. They said, let's just get together. They kind of hit it off. They both actually had a love for helping children with special needs. You see, every Shabbos, every Shabbat, Ayala would help a boy on Montoya Circle next to where the shul is, named Yossi. She'd go over to his house and help him. And Samantha said, "That's so funny. I go to the JCC every Sunday, and help a boy named Yossi as well. And obviously it's the same boy. They both help Yossi." So you can see two kids from two totally different backgrounds. One was going to seminary, one's going to Harvard. One was in Yeshiva High School, one was in college, high school prep school, Pinecrest. One was in a Temple Bethel, one's in Boca Raton Synagogue. Two very different girls who would never meet each other. And yet they're so similar. Two Jewish girls that love to help a boy named Yossi with special needs. So if you care enough, you'll find something in common with someone. Remember, it's not about agreeing with them. It's listening. Listening is the key to a relationship. One day you guys will get married and you'll find that out very quickly. It's all about listening. That's how you build relationships, is by listening. But unfortunately, again, we're in a world where it's not about listening, it's about talking, and it's about everyone yelling, and how do you expect relationships to be built? So give it a shot, see how it goes. You'll see. It's kind of cool because it works every time. Every time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rabbi Broide. And I know you spoke about it a little bit earlier, but it shouldn't take 3 Jewish boys being kidnapped, or the Soviet refuseniks, or the Six-Day War, or the founding of the State of Israel, or the Holocaust to make us realize that all Jews are interconnected, that we have this concept of Jewish unity, that it really should be that our everyday lives are an example of what Jewish unity, of what the Jewish people should look like. So thank you, everybody, for sharing a few thoughts, and it's been really a pleasure.
More than welcome to give out my email or cell phone number if anyone wants to follow up on anything. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Okay? Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.